Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. The thing I'm really interested in is how do we create organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. This podcast has been running since January 2011, and so we have a big archive to explore. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. Before we get into the interview, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all of the folks at CGS for sponsoring my podcast this month. Now, CGS is a company you might not have heard of, but they have been delivering brand building and customer experiences for 40 years for global brands that you will definitely have heard of. Over that time, they have developed deep expertise in both outsourcing and technology, so you should definitely pay attention to what they have to say. On that note, they've recently put together a free ebook and video that I'd like to point you to. It's called The Transformative Power of Generative AI and ChatGPT, and has been authored by CGS's Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer, John Samuel. It's a really comprehensive guide and is designed to deliver insights, summarize research, and also inspire creative problem solving. So do check out the link to the ebook and video in the show notes. Now, let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Cathy, let's see if I can get this right, Cathy Jooste.
Very good.
I believe. Thank you. And John Samuel of CGS. Welcome, Cathy. Welcome, John. Welcome
Hello.
to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
So, Cathy, you are the president of Business Process Outsourcing, or the Business Process Outsourcing division at CGS. And John, you are the EVP and CTO across at CGS. Now, for people that don't know about CGS and yourselves, I wonder if you could do us a favor and give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch, a bit of a kind of a paint a picture a bit, so we can get familiar with you and your work and kind of what you're all about. So if I can come to you, Cathy, first.
Great. All right. Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you for the opportunity. I joined CGS a little bit earlier this year, so a little bit of a newbie as the leader of our outsourcing business globally. Previously, I was the chief commercial officer at another top 5 BPO, but I've spent much of my 25-year career in the technology and consulting space, always with that razor focus on customer experience. I'm thrilled to lead the CGS organization, as we're a very well-reputed and privately owned company. We're this year celebrating our 40th anniversary, and we pride ourselves on our lingual dexterity, our technology-first approach, and our passion for creating out-of-the-box solutions. We serve, Fortune 100 customers, startups, and really everything in between across the customer experience space, tech support, revenue generation, and back office functions across the world.
Awesome. Wow, that's some resume. So, John, can I ask you to do the same? Because you've got actually a slightly longer tenure than Cathy has. So can you tell us about you and your background and what you do at CGS?
Absolutely. Great to be here. Great to participate in this session with us. Thank you very much for inviting us. I've been here for 7 years at CGS. I am responsible for overseeing technology innovation across CGS through all our entities. And I started my career as an electrical engineer, and I spent some time working on nuclear power plant design, believe it or not. Later, I transitioned to IT, and I've been in the IT and technology space for the last 27 years. I've spent most of that in leadership roles, helping companies establish a digital transformation strategy for companies. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have spent the 7 years here, and hopefully we'll touch on that as we go through the rest of the session.
Perfect. Thank you. Crumbs. I mean, I think you're almost a rocket scientist, John. Almost a rocket scientist, I think. So brilliant. So, Cathy, as you said, that CGS has been in the BPO outsourcing technology business now for over 40 years. And I think what's interesting, and you yourself have got years and years worth of experience, as have you, yourself, John. And I think what would be interesting to do before we kind of dive into some of this sort of like stuff that's happening now, as it were, maybe to take a step back and think about how is the industry, that sort of whole BPO outsourcing space, how has it changed over the years? Like, what's the same? What's different? I mean, John, let me come to you first. What do you see as the major changes?
Interesting journey. So I can't talk to the 40 years ago because I'm not old enough, but I'll tell you what I have seen in all the time that I've been in the BPO space. Mm-hmm. There's been significant change over the years in the diversity of what gets outsourced and the types of things that I was asked as an IT leader what we should support. So the services that we are able to provide has grown tremendously with the infusion of technology, mm-hmm. And the types of things that companies partner with us on. So when we go back a long time and looked at how difficult it was to outsource, simple things that we take for granted today, like connectivity with our outsourcers, was so much more complicated. It would take us months, many months, to figure out how to connect and how to get trained on their custom-built tools. The telephony platforms that were used at the time were so complex and pretty legacy. I mean, like analog and digital was just new. And we relied on this legacy technology at the time. And so most of the things that got outsourced were voice-based support. That was the basic stuff that would be outsourced, or some back office process. You would have access to, a company's systems, and you perform some back office processes. So if we go back probably to the last 10 years, this has drastically changed mm-hmm. with the adoption of cloud-based platforms, SaaS, the distributed nature of tools where, legacy tools are not being built by companies, but you're adopting these best in breed like Salesforce and ServiceNow and others. We can truly partner with customers now on many levels. And it's not just a voice issue. It's now our ability to augment our customers through their entire customer service journey. Mm-hmm. So this is the biggest change that we have seen over the years, in my opinion. And we've now kind of transformed over the last 5 years to actually being part of their team to partner on how to digitally transform their services to their customers. Right. So we have many clients who come to us and they're looking to us for that thought leadership and for that innovation. And what else can we do? Our customer, what else can we produce, that's going to help our customers with the way that we service them. So, and I think we are now so important to the story, and you'll see me talk about a little bit about brand ambassadors. I think we've become a key in what we do to help, our outsourcers help their customers so they can advocate better for the brands.
Yeah. I mean, Cathy, and you said it yourself, you're a newbie to CGS, but you've kind of come out and worked in the BPO space, but also in the consulting space. You've kind of like traversed many islands, as it were, in this sort of space. What have you seen as some of the big kind of like changes? What are the big differences? What's the same? What's different?
No, and I love this question because we're preparing for our 40th anniversary. So we've been doing a lot of look back internally on what's going on, with ourselves and in the industry. And if I think personally back 40 years, the early 80s, personally, I was probably trying to conquer my multiplication tables in mm-hmm. my math teacher's unforgiving classroom. The decade was known for an explosion of innovation and human ingenuity, and probably some of the best music that we've seen in the early 80s. But if you think about some of the major events, first, the Challenger launched her maiden voyage in, I think it was 83. We saw the first spacewalk. It was the deployment of, the data relay systems that really paved the way for the global internet as we mm-hmm. see it today. Telephony and global communications were exploding. If some of you recall, or if you, Adrian, I don't know, maybe you had that brick of a Motorola cell phone back in the day that, I don't know, only the early adopters and the cool kids had those. And in 1985, very prevalent, the Direct Line was founded by Peter Wood. This is one of the first, it was the first company to sell insurance entirely over the telephone. Mm. So we saw a general departure from this brick and mortar to more of a need for our kinds of services over the telephone. fast forward to the 90s, the call center really exploded with the advent of the .com era and all things web related, right? So we were seeing a lot of customer care kinds of customer service, tech support, phone calls. This is really also the explosion of the 24-hour banking models, right? And I remember back in the day, if you had a question on your bank statement, you have to drive to the bank and go talk to them. So that all changed. At least it started to change in the 90s. And of course, as we know it today, that's unheard of. I don't even think there's tellers at the bank anymore. In the 2000s, really was the era of offshoring, where we started seeing labor arbitrage. Now, this was a double-edged sword, or maybe it was blessing and a curse. I don't know. Companies became incredibly infatuated by the extra profits generated by this labor arbitrage in places like the India and the Philippines. While simultaneously, there was a bit of a backlash in the US and maybe across Europe, where the consumer expressed their disdain with some of the accents and the lack of brand ambassadorship, as John called it out earlier. So clearly, this is something we've seen come a long way in the industry. Case in point, I'm in our beautiful Romania facility today, and American football is all the rage. That brand ambassadorship, they're talking about their favorite teams. They know more than I do. Well, it doesn't say much. The global youth today are on an equal playing field across the world with things like YouTube and TikTok. The earth has become flatter. Fast forward a little bit more, and I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but I love this kind of look back across history. In the 2010s, if that is such a thing as an era, we really started seeing an explosion of what we would know as call center technologies. The IVRs became more advanced. You started seeing intelligent IVRs. And you started seeing more well-rounded experiences in the contact center. It wasn't just a very basic call. It was things like tech support, level 1, level 2. In fact, I think in 2011, the Google search for the word contact center surpassed the term of call center in Google searches. So it became different. It was a little bit more omni-channel. That brings us to current 2020 and beyond, which really it frames our year gets framed, or our decade gets framed by the pandemic, which has by and large reshaped our human DNA. And most experts will agree that we have not seen this rapid adoption of technology disruption in any other time in our history. So all the things that we've been working on all along is happening at a very accelerated pace. Generative AI is transforming us. The whole agent experience is changing. And I think things are getting better.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Cathy, for that crumbs. That's a history lesson, which is brilliant. And I love the little tidbit there, which is 2011, contact center became a more sort of like searchable term rather than call center. That's kind of like a tipping point sort of thing, which is kind of nice. I will keep that and I will repeat that at some point in the future. But so you've seen all this kind of change, and everything's moving so fast, and it's been accelerated by the pandemic. And I think that it was accelerated because it needed to, but I think the pace of innovation and change is just almost maintained post-pandemic, and we're on a different, we're operating at a faster cadence kind of now. And so everybody's talking about the importance of like good service and great experience, and experience becoming this competitive differentiator. But and I'm somebody that focuses solely on the service and experience sort of space and advocating for better kind of outcomes. But I sometimes going to come across little bits of research that I find are troubling. And recently, I've discovered sort of Forrester published a US and Canadian indices, CX indices, kind of like separately, but also the Institute of Customer Service here in the UK have published research that they've all said that experience and service standards are slipping. And in fact, many of them have said that they've slipped to levels not seen since 2015 and 2016. So there's all this change and development and trying innovation and all these different sort of things. But it feels like it's great on one hand, but on the other hand, it feels like standards are slipping. And what I wanted to ask, given both your perspectives, is to get your take on what you're seeing. And if they are slipping, then what's going on, and what are the big challenges that are driving these slipping challenges? I mean, Cathy, I'll come straight back to you if that's okay.
Listening to your question, in one way, it almost catches me off guard a little, because we run these contact centers and we pride ourselves on the experiences and we think, oh, things are going great. But if I have to be very, very honest, and if I think of the last 5 years, there are probably 3 things that have happened that probably would make this statement true. The first is let's go back to the pandemic. Think about what happened. Our agents were sent home in a rush. And we all thought we were going to die. I'm being a little dramatic, but there was a huge level of stress across the human population. Dogs were barking in the background. Kids were trying to do their schoolwork. It was a lot going on. And it is very difficult for the agent population to continue to give the empathy and the customer experience and the things that we were used to before in an environment that wasn't designed for that, right? So there's a perceived lack of empathy, and maybe it's a true lack of empathy because the environment just wasn't conducive. It was a tough time for us. The second factor I think comes into play is really there's a bit of an age demographic crisis. We have on one hand these baby boomers, and on the other hand we have what I call next generation of talent. Let's call it Gen XYZ, whatever we want it to be.
Are we not back to A now? I don't know. I think we've kind of rolled around the alphabet.
I don't know. Roman numeral 1. But I think these 2 consumer groups have very different needs for customer experience, right? Baby boomers, and I'm stereotyping, I'm sure we can find exceptions everywhere, but baby boomers want to talk to a person. They want to solve the problem specifically. The next generation of talent doesn't want that. They're digitally native. They want it solved as quickly as possible. As an industry, we're in a bit of a crisis trying to figure out how we solve this problem for both, right? Either we swing too far on the digital side or we swing too far on the voice side. And in the meantime, there's this point where we're not quite pleasing everybody at the same time. So I think that will evolve for various different reasons. And then the third one is around the global labor market. And I'd like to say this is a US issue, but it's not. It's a global labor market issue. We've seen a skill erosion compounded with, massive wage inflation that has made a very different experience for what we've seen before. So while I was surprised to hear the question early, I don't think it's crazy. I do think we've gone through a bit of an identity crisis. Fortunately, I think we're coming out on the other end and there's a bright future for us, but it's not too surprising a fact.
Yeah. John, and what do you think about that? I mean, have you got anything that you'd like to add to that about what you think is why standards are, the perception that standards are slipping?
I have two points that I think I want to hit on, and just to align with what Cathy was talking about. I think one of them is cost, right? We've probably over the last 10 years, we've had more economic uncertainty and issues that we've hit than probably a long time. Through every one of those, companies have looked for ways to reduce costs. And I think that's driven 2 outcomes from there. One of them is, can we reduce cost of staffing, let's say in a contact center and other areas, and can we adopt more technology? The second one is just outright, reduction of cost. Let's just reduce costs. Let's see if we can hire differently or at a lower cost. So if we look at the technology angle, and if you look at most interactions you have as a consumer in all the new channels that have been launched, which is, chat, email, SMS, and all these other technologies, most of them are not great. They are very narrow in what they can help you with. So people put them out there and, that immediately creates, let's say, a reduction in demand of contact center agents and maybe gives you some reduction in cost. But we would have to drill into some of these stats that are out there to see where the dissatisfaction is coming from the consumer. We could think we're doing a good job, but if the consumer doesn't think so, I don't know that they are distinguishing, from an agent they spoke to or a piece of technology that was deployed that's not doing things the right way.
Yeah.
And, we talk about omni-channel. We've been talking about it forever. It's supposed to be this great converged experience where as long as you interact with me, I know exactly what you've done. But, look at some of the major companies that you interact with. If you start on the web and create a ticket or support works with you and then later you call in, you almost start all over again. The technology is not converged. It doesn't work smoothly. So some of this could be coming from there. And the other part is the stuff that Cathy touched on, right? If the companies don't partner and support or fund their contact centers properly, then we will staff them with potentially people who are not as skilled and maybe cannot provide the same level of service. So I think these are two contributors that probably, go into that. And I'm not sure if that statement that's published by Forrester is, a global statement, right? It's probably some average thing. There's probably a lot of companies that are doing it right.
Oh, without a doubt. I think there are people that are definitely getting it right. And I think the indices are definitely like an averaging kind of things out. But I just thought it would be an interesting sort of view because we looked at the past, the last 40 years, how things have changed. This is a snapshot, maybe slightly controversial, sort of like of the present. And so like say it says that standards are slipping. And John, to your point, we've been talking about this thing about omnichannel for years, kind of like now. And yet there was data that came out from Deloitte recently where they're in their global contact center survey, which said that only 7% of the respondents said that they have all of their channels fully integrated with each other.
There you
go. 7%. It's mind blowing when everybody talks about this sort of stuff. And so, but what it does do, it speaks to the level of challenge and the kind of how much improvement we could see, whether the room for improvement there could be, going forward.
Yeah, if you think about, if you looked at this holistically and what you're talking about is very relevant to the conversation. Sometimes, cheap is very expensive, right? You work so hard with your customer acquisition strategy to lose them in this stage where you have a phenomenal product, a phenomenal service, and you just weren't there for the customer when they needed you, and now you've lost that customer. You can see that in a lot of industries that accept churn, where they'll work so hard to acquire you as a customer, and then this is the area where you're looking for the cost savings, and you end up losing a customer because they had some situation and they weren't happy with you, and your entire brand and company became that experience in that moment. So I think this is important. It's a great point, and I think probably as an industry and as a partner to our customers, we need to put special focus on it.
Yeah. And so we've done a bit of the past. We reflected a little bit on the on the present, some of the challenges kind of like there. But when we're setting up this podcast, and I think this is kind of one of the things we try and do with this podcast is investigate one, current challenges, but also kind of what good looks like, but also kind of what's coming down the track, what the future looks like. And we were talking about the future of CX outsourcing and what it might look like. And Cathy, you had a view on what the future would look like or will look like for outsourcers and what they are likely to be doing or focusing on in the future. And it'd be great if you could, one, share that with us, but also explain what you think is driving that change.
Yeah, no, that's great. You look around the players in the CX outsourcing space here, the BPO space for that matter, you'll find a concentration of the top 5 big players, and then you'll find a huge long tail of everybody else. Right? You think about the barriers of entry getting into the BPO or the outsourcing space, it hasn't been traditionally that big. There's plenty of mom and pop shops, people with an entrepreneurial bone, someone who knows someone, they hook them up with a piece of work, hire a few agents, and off to the races we go. So this doesn't always grant for the most brilliant business strategists. In some cases, they're running a very successful business and they're moving away. They're working through that. Unfortunately, this also means that as a business, as an industry, we're very diverse in how we look at it. And I think there's 3 macro trends that are going to significantly change this picture in the near and the mid future. And I think I'll give you the answer before I get into it. There is going to be a significant consolidation.
Okay.
The first thing, in my opinion, there is going to be a significant consolidation. The first thing that drives this is the next generation services that we talk about all the time, such as generative AI, robotic process automation, process modeling, data science, cyber, all these kinds of things. Many believe that these services are going to put the BPO industry out of business. And to be honest, it will, for a significant amount of the smaller players who have not been able to make the necessary investments in this technology. time will tell. Even some of the bigger players, I think, are playing catch up to some extent because they've been enjoying healthy profits and growth throughout the year. So there hasn't been a motivation to do this. And CGS, we're incredibly fortunate that we originated out of the tech industry, and our whole company is based on the premise that technology is a critical business enabler. No manual spreadsheets. Our founder and CEO, Phil Friedman, doesn't believe, he's never accepted the human lift solution when technology can help us to be more effective and efficient. So we've been preparing since our inception for this day, and we welcome generative AI and the revolution, everything that we believe actually customer experience will improve with generative AI. It won't go the other way, but there's still a need for the human element. Mm-hmm. The second part beyond next generation services is, I think I mentioned it earlier, the earth continues to be flattening, not in a conspiracy theory kind of a way, but in a global geographic play. Most of our customers are starting to become more global. They are serving customers all over the world, not just in very specific areas that support English. So CGS, we operate across the Americas, North, South, Europe, Africa, Asia, and we continue to expand. As such, we can support customers in the language of their choice across very complex business interactions because it's a very natural way. Smaller BPOs have a significant disadvantage in this space, and we'll have to see how that all shakes out. Some of the bigger guys probably are a little bit more ahead there. And then thirdly, I think the BPO CX industry is maturing. Gone are the days of, let me just call for a password reset. Have you tried rebooting? Is the answer. Mm-hmm. We handle very complex business interactions today across the entire spectrum that allow banks to focus on banking, healthcare providers to focus on healthcare, right? And let us do everything else. Let us do the customer service, the tech support, some of the back office accounting transactions, even HR transactions. It's become a lot more complex than just the very average services. I'm in Bucharest today, as I mentioned earlier, and I will tell you, CGS, we have about a little bit less than 5,000 employees here in Romania, and 400 of them have law degrees. 800 of them have accounting or finance degrees. 90% of the employee population either have college degrees or are in the process of getting college degrees. So without this level of education, you're not able to support the full rounded spectrum of needs for a customer and really help them to drive a better experience, even for their end customers. So this is what our clients needs, and this is what our clients need going forward. So I think in summary, the three trends that's going to cause this major consolidation and reshaping of the BPO industry or the customer experience industry is the next generation services, the geographic and lingual diversity needed, and then the increasingly complex services.
I mean, it feels like there's this, big forces that are, for many brands, going to almost force them to start operating on a core competency kind of model. And it's basically what you're suggesting. It feels like, so yeah. If you're a bank, focus on banking, and then get in the service or the cyber experts or kind of the process kind of like mapping kind of an automation kind of experts, and that could all end up getting bundled in kind of like because it's just easier to bundle those things in. And so that, fascinating sort of thing, which might make some of the smaller players a bit more vulnerable because they're not being able to offer that breadth of services. But John, Cathy kind of talked about kind of the generative AI and how it's going to change. And I wanted to come to you because we're awash with generative AI and predictions and things. It's a bit like AI and generative AI become the one and the only thing right now. It's brilliant. The generative AI has catapulted the potential of artificial intelligence into mainstream consciousness, and I've got everybody thinking about it, talking about it. I think that's great. But we're also awash with these predictions that we're moving to this fully automated customer service kind of future that generative AI is going to take care of everything, and we're no longer need to work, and we're just going to be able to hang out in the park and take the dog for a walk and all these different things. So, with your technology hat on, John, I wanted to ask you, are the bots going to be taking over soon? And do we have to start to plan for kind of like majority vacation and then a little bit of work, or how's it all going to pan out?
I love it. I love it. I love this. anytime there's some breakthrough or some phenomenal news that just dominates, the world, I love that. So as a technologist who is focused on infusing technology, introducing technology, digital transformation, et cetera, I love all of that, right? It builds awareness. It brings our leaders into it. It helps our budgets. It helps investment. I love it. But I think at the moment, I think it's wishful thinking. And I think that's become kind of fairly apparent over the last couple of months where reality has kicked in. That said, disruptive, innovative technology is not new. We've always been in the lookout for it. We've always invested in R&D as technologists, and we've always looked for that to bring it to our leaders within organizations in order to do things in a better way, right? And probably for decades, we've been looking for that magic solution to create that fully automated customer service where we don't need to rely on human beings in order to sit there and service some need. And we've done that through a lot of technologies. We keep talking about AI, but this whole RPA, robotic process automation, and other technology that has been introduced over the years has created efficiency. But what we see, and you yourself probably as a consumer can probably relate to this, this is not exactly what people want. I mean, there is a need out there where people want to pick how they want to be serviced, how they want to be helped. And so we can come up with all these solutions and say, I'm going to give you a chatbot and that's the only way you're going to deal with me. Well, consumers are very interesting. They like things done a certain way. And if you can't service them in the way they want to be serviced, they will go find a company and they'll build their loyalty to that company to be serviced in the way that they're looking for. So this whole concept that the bots are going to come in and do everything is a challenge. Cathy talked about the generations, right? So I lost track how many generations exist. So I went out there and I looked it up on the internet, and I was curious to see how many generations still are out there that are in play that we have to deal with, as companies who deal with individuals. And think about the concept where these generations had an analog childhood and they got pulled into a digital adulthood. So you grew up in an analog world, all of a sudden you got everything digital around you and you're supposed to kind of make it all work. So I looked at these generations, right? So we had the baby boomers from the 40s, Generation Jones from the 50s, Gen Xers from the 60s, Zennials from the 70s, Millennials from the 80s, Gen Zs from the 90s, and now we have Gen Alpha starting with 2011. And if you look at all these generations, they are used to interacting and doing things in a very, in a way that gives them comfort. So I don't know that bots are here and immediately take over and let's go to the park and life is good. I think this is an evolving industry. Technology has been evolving at a tremendous pace. And if you look at, technology evolution, the pace at which technology is moving is getting shorter and shorter. But I don't see any time in the foreseeable future where we don't have human intelligence, compassion, providing caring service that actually understands what you're going through. That's not a mechanical, automated piece of technology that doesn't add context to what you're looking for. So I see us adopting bleeding edge technology, but I see adopting it in areas that are going to be less risky to the consumer. So I see that being adopted inside our contact centers, helping our agents to be much, much better at what they are, refine it, mature it, make sure it works, get through all the regulations and all the privacy concerns and everything else that's out there first before you start to see it kind of full blown. It's the only way to go, and we don't need the rest of the service model.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fascinating, but I think the one of the things that strikes me about that, and it's something I've been talking about before, is almost like we have to be intentional about the sort of the balance that we want to provide in terms of that human technological kind of balance and be cognizant of our customers and their needs and the generational preferences and all these different things. And those generational preferences, they're not fixed and they bleed and they can change because there's different levels of maturity and just general personal preference. So I think we have to be very intentional about the how we're going to strike that balance, that human and tech kind of balance.
Well said.
I think the thing I want to circle back to something that you said, Cathy, because you said you're speaking from your Romanian office and you're talking about the number of people who've got law degrees and this sort of degree and that sort of degree. And I was a bit like, wow, cool. And I think the dynamics of the kind of the sort of talent implications that are in the contact center and then the outsourcing industry is a real, there's a lot of shifting plates going on right now. And I wondered if I could come to you and ask you, like, what are the talent implications of all of this? Because it feels to me like we talked about before, there's an economic and cost pressure. There's a changing work patterns in terms of whether you're on the calls or you're on the phones or you're doing some other sort of outsourced kind of work. But then there's the qualifications of people that are, and then it's almost a bit like the job's not getting any simpler. It's probably getting more complex. And it feels like there's a bit of a need for a reformation in terms of how we look and view the kind of the whole sort of space. And so I just wondered, Cathy, can you just help me understand, what do you think the talent implications of all of this are? Because it's like there's some big things getting pulled back and forward in all this sort of space right now.
No, absolutely. And but the good news is that our agent landscape is also evolving with the consumer landscape at the same time. We're kind of growing up together. Mm-hmm. We're more digitally native, and I can tell you it's awesome. I've met with, in the last 10 days, I've been on this world tour, and I've met with agents across India, Israel, Romania, and the energy and the passion are off the charts. It's unlike anything we've seen. They can multitask at a rate that will make your head spin. I mean, we can't keep up with it. They can access the ever-changing knowledge base, and they adapt to change much quicker than my generation did. Not that I'm old, but now the main impact that we as an industry owe this next generation is to modernize the way that they work, starting with training. I talk a lot about training all over the place because this one thing that we're still behind in as an industry, we still offer, we have the cool bean bags in the corner, we have ping pong tables, we talk about how fun and cool and hip we are, but then we hire agents and we send them to 5 weeks of training followed by 4 weeks of nesting, and they have to sit in a classroom and their eyes roll over. I mean, think about these guys, they're not interested in this way of training doesn't work anymore. At CGS, we're fortunate because we actually have a learning division that spends a lot of time in R&D in this, and they've come up with some really cool things. They focus on AI and how you use augmented reality. But even without all of that, the way that we train our agents has to be more modular, more bite-sized, has to be gamified. They have to get the instant reward or instant punishment for that little piece that they just learned. And we need to keep it fresh and exciting. Now, in return, they're going to reward us. They're going to reward us with productivity and quality results, unlike any that we've seen in the past. But we still, as an industry, have a little bit of work to do to modernize that agent experience.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I thought so. Does he think that all plays into this whole sort of thing? Because it's, again, we go back to that sort of, there's another sort of like perennial, what would I call it, debate sort of thing around. We talked about call center, then it moved to a contact center, and then it's sort of like, now it's moving to like a value center. Yeah. And it's, John, does that play into all that sort of stuff? Is that it's been talked about for a long time, a bit like omni-channel, really. I mean, but we're starting to see people shift. I mean, I remember seeing a big piece of research that Accenture did. I think it was released last year, that talked about that there's only about 20% of big brands and players that have that have made that shift from cost center to value center. But when they do, they sort of grow at a 3.5x times kind of like their peers. But also for like, what is it? relatively minor extra additional investment. So do you think all of that is that shift? Are you seeing that shift starting to happen? And because it's going to be fueled by the change in technology, change in demographics, change in skill and talent sort of implications, all of those different sort of things. I mean, do we think we're on a tipping point for that sort of a conversation, or is it still going to be a bit of an uphill push?
I definitely, you could kind of see a lot happening. And I think if we're able to make this shift to, AI and technology handling the more trivial needs, and, that would naturally then push for an upskilling of existing staff to be better trained and provide, support for the more complex cases that is much more difficult to automate through technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're talking about the contact center being more of a value center, if you look at the customer journey from beginning to end, from when you target the clients that you want to acquire, and if your customer journey is done right, and there's fanatical focus on the customer, and trying to get that customer not to just buy, but if you want to get that customer to become a brand advocate and ambassador, then the contact center and what it does and how it does it with a mix of, technology and human beings and a perfect mix, that deliberate mix that you were talking about earlier, this absolutely turns the contact center into a more critical process in converting your customers into, advocates to advocate for your brand. And there's probably nothing less expensive than getting a customer so happy with you, not because they're happy with your product or service, but they're happy with you all around. In their moment of need, when they needed something, you were there, and the people who service your brand understood what's expected from them and then what to do, and they tell everyone around them, friends, family, and everybody else, and advocate for your brand. So I think this is where the contact center can definitely be looked at as something that transforms and becomes a value center, instead of looking at it like, wait a minute, what's my cost? How can I reduce the cost? How can I squeeze the cost? How do I, create that perfect mix of technology and people that are going to service my brand? And how do I make it where all my customers leave that experience very happy and advocate for me and become brand ambassadors?
So, Cathy, I can see you're itching to get in here because you've got I'm all over the BPO space. I can see all these different things. I'm speaking to people. Tell me, kind of like, are we seeing that shift? Are we going to see that drive to that? Is there a real kind of hunger and appetite from what you're hearing from people about that, making that shift?
Absolutely. And I think John is spot on in everything he said. The conversations and, having been in sales and many years in this too, the conversations have always been, how do I get from a cost center to a value center? Or it used to be cost center to revenue center, and now it's cost center to value center, right? And the easy answer always used to be, oh, it's fine. We're going to sell sales now. We're not going to just sell customer care and tech support. We're going to sell sales. So we're going to give you some revenue and you'll be fine. That's a little bit of a nascent answer. But I think, just like John just said, the full rounded experience that we are being asked and that we're offering to our clients really drives a different level of value. It goes back to what I said earlier. Allow the customers to focus on their core value proposition so that we can do everything after that and really help them be successful. Nobody likes to call anywhere and say, all right, I've opened a ticket. The answer is I've opened a ticket. And, what does that mean? I've opened a ticket. Does that mean my problem is solved? Do I need to call back on this ticket? What? No, you have to truly resolve the problems. And as we talked about before, the agents have to have so many more dimensions and facets to truly solve that problem rather than just opening tickets or passing it down the line, the swivel chair, as we call it in telecom.
Excellent. So I know that, and I've been slightly privy to this because we've been talking about setting up this kind of podcast. Oh, and by the way, you'll have heard in the intro as well that CGS is sponsoring the podcast for this month. I just want to say, as part of the kind of thing, thank you for sponsoring the podcast this month. Brilliant. But I also can know, because I've been privy to understanding who you work with, different kind of brands, which I'm a bit like, wow, you're like a best kept secret around here in terms of some of the people that you work with and kind of some of the big brands. I mean, this is like top level stuff. And so I thought it might be interesting to help people understand a bit more about how you do, who you work with and how you do, is if you could have any client examples that you think are getting it right, sort of thing, that are building themselves to get that balance right by delivering now, but also future proofing their business, preparing for the future, that you can talk about. And I wondered if you could share maybe a couple of stories. I mean, maybe I can come to you, Cathy, you first for one, and maybe John from you. So Cathy, do you want to pick a favorite?
Sure. I have many favorites, and we value our customers' privacy, so I can't share them by brand, but let me give you a couple examples. Let me give you one example that I love. There's a client in the high technology sector. Their specialization is security services. And today they're a market leader across various security offerings. We started with them early on in their journey, and we started with a handful of agents. I think we were doing tech support or I don't even know. And as their operation has grown, we've grown with them. And it's a natural discussion around, well, I need to add this capability. Well, let me try this. I can help you. So now today, fast forward, they were in startup mode and they're a market leader today. And we've been with them throughout that journey. We handle all their back office A through Z. We handle sales, professional services, tech support, level 1, 2, 3, customer service, everything that you could think of that happens in the back office. And this allows the client to focus on what they're going to focus on, which is security offerings. I made this point a couple of times, but they leave the innovation to us. We've had to disrupt our own business a few different times where we've taken out volumes and we've automated different things and we've gotten more efficient in our own processes. But in the end, we get rewarded as a BPO because the business keeps growing and they keep being successful, and we're along with the ride. So there's many examples like that. I just love this one in particular. I wish I could share the name, but yeah, I'll leave it there.
That's fine. I mean, I think it makes sense. And then there's probably only a few brand names that you could put in that sort of like in that category. So go on and sort of like have your own guesses, all the listeners, and kind of like you might be able to figure it out. But I think what's interesting about what you say is that, and this is where I guess the commercial model for an outsourcer is kind of moving, that it's not just about the volumes and not just about the seats. It's about the value that you that you're delivering and you're creating. So I guess maybe there's a point where it says it's not just about what you get, but it's about the relationship and it's about the kind of the longevity of it. And so it's true partnership, right? It's not just about kind of like how much you're going to bill at the end of the month. It's about what's the health of the relationship and how can we kind of make each other successful.
Exactly.
Excellent. John, do you have an example?
I do. I'll start with this. We are an interesting company in that, we tell our employees all the time to take pride in what they do and fully immerse them in how we service our customers, and to always think of value and how to bring more value to that engagement. And so continuous improvement is at the heart of everything that we do. As Cathy, talked about this incredible, staff we have across the globe and how knowledgeable they become about processes with the customers. Often we know more about those customers and how they're being serviced than, our clients that hired us, right? So we encourage them to provide that feedback and to streamline that process and just continually make improvements to it. So like Cathy, we don't talk about specific clients because, we'd have to pick them all. We love them all, right? So if we're servicing 3 or 4 clients in an industry, it won't be fair to name them. But I'll give you an example of a company that I think is doing a good job and has kind of learned to evolve and service the client the right way. And that's Amazon. Almost everyone you talk to kind of loves the Amazon model. It's convenient. They deliver all the stuff. But if you look at the early years when they launched, they try to use technology holistically, and they made it very difficult for you to get to an agent. In fact, you could look for a long time and you couldn't find a phone number to call and engage with someone. So over the years, they've made that much easier, and they have made human beings available to kind of supplement where the technology doesn't work. So they could have frequently asked questions, they could automation, they could have all the stuff. But I think Amazon has done a good job where they've infused a good balance of these things in order to kind of service things the right way. So I do think a lot of people do kind of use their model to model themselves after.
Yeah. So I think the thing I really like is that, I understand that it's hard for you to talk about clients, given that I understand some of the clients and I understand some of the sensitivity of the clients, that yes, whilst they want to focus on their core competence or their, a core area, and then outsource a lot of other kind of things, they sometimes don't want other people to know about that.
Right.
And sometimes you're not allowed to kind of to say that because it's all written into the contract and yada, yada, yada. So, and that's a problematic. But what I think is interesting as well from your perspective is, like, I've seen some of the stuff that you've developed for clients and you developed in yourself, and you talk about yourself as being a technology first outsourcer rather than an outsourcer that's acquired technological capability. And I think it's really interesting because there's a natural affinity then between yourselves and the sort of the technology sort of space, and then also kind of clients that have increasing technological kind of like needs. And so I would encourage people to sort of to check out some of the stuff that you're doing, because some of it's like super cool, particularly around VR and AR and all that type of stuff, which seems to be the forgotten cousins in all this generative AI sort of like kind of maelstrom that we find ourselves in. But we could talk for ages about that. So let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. But before we kind of wrap up and ask you a couple of just wrap up questions, Cathy, John, anything that we've missed out that you'd like to highlight before we can move on?
I'll add one thing, by the way. I like what you just said before. And, being on the technology side, I'm biased. So I love technology first. I love that. But in fact, we are solution first, which I think is important for people to make note of, because technology for the sake of technology often doesn't work, or it doesn't make business sense, or the ROI isn't there, or whatever it is. But I think if we're solution first, the technology, you can't be without it. And I think we have a tremendous benefit in what we do as a company. We're a very diverse company. We're talking about the customer, the contact center, and CX today. But the other divisions we have, which you just alluded to with our augmented reality solutions, we have, going back to the roots of our company, our software division that has our platform, that's an ERP-based supply chain platform. So the company at its core knows how to solve problems, and that's how we come at it. And so if I had to kind of add some things here, look, this Gen AI is wonderful. I love this. I think this is going to be tremendous. It's going to transform things. It's probably what happened when the internet came out. This is, how people are talking about it. But let's not forget, it's not mature. AI is very biased. It is not inclusive, especially when it comes to different languages, right? Think about the people who built this stuff. We build it around specific languages, typically English and some of the more common languages. So the technology isn't there yet. I think we need to be aware of that. And, at least for us as a company, coming from our CEO all the way through all our executive team, we embrace what's happening in the industry. We will, infuse it into what we do in a very deliberate way. And I loved what you said, that intentional balance of how you introduce it so it doesn't start to break everything. And I think in the near term, if we can increase its internal use before we affect the consumer who's not very tolerant of experimenting on them, right? They want mature things that are actually working. They don't want to be the guinea pigs. So I think there's a lot of room for us to do that, where we can work on improving the agent effectiveness by upskilling them using this technology to do agent assist, to put information at their fingertips much faster, much better, more complete. And, all the normal metrics that you use to measure things. Cathy talked earlier about, resolving things. So first call resolution, which is a great measurement. did you take care of me? Was it effective? Was it good? Was it quick? And am I satisfied? Was that a good experience for me? And I love the surveys, by the way. At the end of the calls, we used to, people used to put like 6 surveys. Now they'll put 1 survey. Would you hire the person you just spoke to? I like that one, because listen, sometimes people can't help you, but they're really wonderful. And that's, if you're willing to hire them into your company, that means they did a good job.
I love that kind of question. Would you hire that person? That's great. Cathy, anything you want to add?
I couldn't add anything better. I think that was very well said.
Fantastic. So I'll tell you what, I'll come straight back to you, Cathy, and say this. We talk about a lot of stuff over these kind of podcasts, and sometimes it's a bit like there's a lot of moving parts. And so what I also like to do with my guests is ask them to properly just boil it down and get really instructive and directive to our listeners and say, if you were to give your best advice to someone listening to this that wants to improve both their customer and or their kind of employee experience, I would like to say, Cathy says, complete this sentence. Cathy says, do this, ... How would you complete that sentence?
That's a great question, because contrary to everything we just talked about, the next generation, the technology, the automation, all these things that are so wonderful. For us, it comes down to core values. When you select a partner, it's much like entering into a marriage. There's going to be bumps along the way. There's going to be new technology. Tomorrow there's something else. You want to find a partner that's going to work with you on that journey, that's going to be truly a partner. I go back to the story, our founder, Phil Friedman, he shared with me how this business got started at CGS. And he tells a very interesting story. Many, many years ago, he had a proposal with a major technology firm for a big accounting firm, like 38,000 seats. We had no experience, no facility, no credentials, no anything. And we did our best to submit the proposal, and guess what? We lost. It was awarded to someone else. So Phil went to the buyer and he sat down with him in his office and he said, please reconsider. And he tells the story very colorfully. There's some expletives involved. And who do you think you are? You have nothing. You have no credentials. You're nobody. Why? How could you even ask me this question? What can you do for me? And Phil gave a very simple answer. He said, look, I give you my word. I will deliver. I will not let you down. I'm sure there's more to it, but somehow the process got reevaluated, and that's how we started our business. The work was awarded to us, and that's a relationship that we still have today, even after all these years. So the value of core values cannot be undermined. Find a partner that you believe is making the right investments, that's going to grow along the way, but more importantly, find someone that mimics the core values that you want to emulate. Awesome.
Perfect. John, anything to add? I mean, complete that sentence. John says, do this, ... Complete the sentence.
I would agree with everything Cathy said, with the following addition, I guess. Partner with companies that are like you and will respect and improve your brand, and make sure they can innovate with you, right? So maybe that's a selfish plug for the technology side, but don't just hire a company that's just going to, follow some strict guideline of an SOW. Can they innovate? Can they move you forward? Can they actually, be a great partner for you, for your brand?
Perfect. Thank you. So one final thing that I wanted to finish on, and because I've been struck how we're living in a world where it feels like we were constantly kind of presented with new kind of like bad news stories, whether it's kind of like, we've come through the pandemic and all these different things, inflation and cost of living crisis and things. And then it's like, and then tragedies like earthquakes in Morocco and incredible floods in Libya. It's like, I feel myself, I'm doom scrolling every morning over my cup of coffee. And so what I'd like to do is to wrap up on a good news story or a positive note, if I can. So maybe I come to you first, John. It's like, can you tell me, John, what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week?
So, look, I'm challenged like you, and sometimes it's just, you can't find any positive news. But the best news came from Cathy last week. So I don't know if that counts as the best news around the world, but she was in India. So I guess technically it counts. She wasn't here in the US. So the best news from Cathy, as someone who's recently joined the organization, was recognizing our operation in Hyderabad, India. I mean, she perfectly captured what an untapped gem it is, and what a incredible team we have there, how passionate they are, and how we need to tell the whole world about it, because it's this incredible operation that we've put in place with phenomenal people, and that lifted me up. I loved that news last week.
Perfect. What about you, Cathy? What's your good news story for this week?
No, I'm glad I could help, John. I have a couple. I've been with customers and agents this week, which I love, and I witnessed a few different ones, but one in particular, reward and recognition ceremonies, where our customer was presenting awards to our top agent performers. And I tell you what, it sends chills down your spine when the customer is so grateful. This is very senior executives, and they're engaging with the agent and telling them, thank you. Thank you for being an ambassador of my brand. Thank you for everything you're delivering. And then the agent at the same time is returning with this just overwhelming gratitude of being part of this. It's a very, very touching moment. If you haven't been part of something like that, but I don't want to miss my favorite story in Romania. Yesterday, we drove to Brasov from Bucharest, and you go through the beautiful countryside in Transylvania, past Dracula's castle, actually. Mm-hmm. And I saw a baby bear frolicking on the side of the street, which it was like one of the most amazing things. I was like, where's Mama Bear, and why am I so happy right now? So that's it for me.
Wow, cuddly, kind of like baby bear frolicking on the side of the road. What's not to like? What's not to like? And so that's Cathy, John. That's all I have for today. I just want to say people should definitely check out CGS, because you are a best kept secret in many kind of like parts, particularly around the kind of the work that you do and the scope of the work that you do. But I also want to say, again, thank you for sponsoring the podcast this month, but also more importantly, thank you for spending your time and sharing your experience with me today. That's been awesome.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Great talking to you.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. Do tune in again. Thanks very much.